finance meeting of Tuesday. Right. We're going to call to order the meeting of the Finance Committee meeting for Tuesday, April 26, 2022. We will have a roll call. Bill Galvin.
Yeah.
Alder Brian Johnson.
Here.
Alder Jesse Brunette.
Here.
Alder Jim Hutchinson.
Here.
All right, I will take a motion to approve of the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
We had a motion by Brian Johnson and a second by Alder Brunette. All in favor?
Aye.
Any nays? That passes. We'll move on to the approval of the minutes.
Move to approve.
Second.
We had a motion by Brian Johnson, second by Jesse Brunette. All in favor?
Aye.
Any nays? That passes. Moving on to regular business. Item number 1, consideration with possible action to appoint a chair.
Nominate Alderman Johnson. He would accept.
I would.
Second.
We have a motion for Alder Johnson and a second. Any other nominees? I guess I'm all in favor.
Aye.
Any nays? That passes. Our chair is Alder Johnson. And would you like to take over at this point?
Number 2, thank you, committee, by the way. Appreciate the support. I think we're going to have a fun year. So item number 2, consideration with possible action to appoint a vice chair. I would accept nominations. I would not, I mean, as chair, I can make the nomination. I would nominate Alder Brunette.
Thank you. I accept the nomination.
Okay. Nominations do not require a second by Robert's rules, even though we always do, but it does not require a second. So are there any other nominations? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Item number 3, congratulations, Alder Brunette. Item 3, consideration of possible action, the amortization of the 2022 borrowing schedules.
We have a representative from Ellers on the line, Jonathan, and I was going to let him, these are his charts, or actually it's his memo, and he helped pull the numbers together. So I was going to let him jump in and explain it, and then unless you have questions first, or do you want him to go through, explain what he came back with, and then is that all right with the committee?
Yeah, let's just go ahead and open the floor.
Moved.
Motion by Alder Brunette.
Second.
Second by Alder Hutchinson. Any discussion? Seeing all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. The motion carries. Jonathan, welcome.
Thank you, and congratulations, and it's good to see a new committee. So, so per your request at the last committee meeting, I put together some different amortization schedules, and we thought it would be easier if I just kind of laid it out in a memo instead of showing a bunch of changes that necessarily hone in on the details. But the chart on top of page 2 of the memo really is the key takeaway. So we looked at it 4 different ways. And really this is just changing the geo notes issue. Everything that's being financed by the geo bonds, we looked through the list and didn't find anything in the bonds that would have an economic life cycle that would be close to, more close to 10 years or something like that. It was more of the longer term lifestyle cycles. So we didn't think about changing that. With the notes, we looked at doing the entire notes issue, which is $3,825,000 over 10 years. And that's just a level P&I over 10 years, over 5 years. And then instead of just doing the full notes issue over those 2 durations, we looked at pulling out the squad cars and police equipment specifically, and just because they have kind of that shorter life cycle, and amortizing those over 5 years, with the rest of the items in that notes issue amortized over 10. And then similarly, the fourth one, we looked at amortizing those police items over 3 years and the rest over 10. So just to show the difference, and it's really, you can split it a million different ways, but the key takeaway is that with that 10-year amortization schedule, sort of the initial schedule that we went into this process with, you're going to pay a little bit more in interest because you're stretching out the repayment, and you're going to have annual impact to the levy. So that chart at the top of the second page of the memo shows 10-year notes, 24.9 million in total P&I, or 4.7 for just the notes, and about a $200,000 a year increase in tax levy for debt service only. The 5 years, you're going to reduce the total P&I, so 4.2, so about a $500,000 decrease in the amount of interest paid. But the impact on the tax levy is more like 660,000 a year increase for the 5-year planning period. And then pulling out pulling out the police items and looking at those specifically over 5 years and 3 years, you see the 5-year option was 4.36 and the 3-year option is 4.33. So slight difference in interest cost. But the tax impact showed the 5-year police option about 600,000 a year for the first 3 years, and then it drops to 500,000. The 3-year police option about 700,000 a year for the first 3 years, and that drops to about 430,000. So really, you're the decision point here, and I hope I adequately described that in the summary section, is that do you want to emphasize paying debt off quicker, with the impact being to the tax levy, or do you want to amortize things a little bit longer and have a more controllable, a little bit more stable tax levy impact? And again, there's a million ways in between as well.
Okay. And thank you for that explanation, Jonathan. I think, when I first requested this, I mean, this analysis is useful. My biggest concern, of course, is when you have, we're picking on police vehicles, but there are other assets, of course, within the bond issue that this would apply to. But when you're looking at, if I recall correctly, 3-year life cycle on police vehicles, if this is our standard practice, is to default to a 10-year note, right? Within 3 years, you find yourself in a downward spiral where not only are you paying, are you making a payment on the vehicles that are in service, but you're also making a payment on vehicles that are out of service, and doing so for another 7 years. So to me, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Jonathan, this does not feel like a very sustainable path. And the reason I leave that door open is to please explain to me if I'm wrong. I know sometimes the way you manage your personal finances and the way you manage public finances are two very different animals. So could you maybe just shed some light on that for us?
Yeah, no, I agree, and I appreciate that. I think I state in the first sentence of the second paragraph in the summary section that trying to match up the repayment of debt related to an asset is a prudent fiscal decision, right? That is the nominal way to do it. Really trying to do that, even in government. The challenge is because in Wisconsin, you are constrained by so many different things, not least of which is just having the property tax being the sole repayment source for the most part. That you have to balance it a little bit more with annual impact. So I think, and I also say that because this has been the past practice to defer principal on debt issuance, making a change will have a significant impact at the beginning in terms of increasing tax rates. So I think if it's a direction that you want to look at doing more of in terms of matching life cycle useful life with amortization schedule, I think maybe doing it in a phased kind of way. Like we can look at doing this. That's why the police, right? That was kind of an obvious one because that's always going to be something that you're borrowing for every year, every couple of years is squad cars and police equipment. So it's kind of an easy one to pick out and say that, that can be more quickly amortized and you'll still have an impact, but it won't be horrible. But I agree. I think the point is, yes, that if you can do the balancing maneuver and match those useful lives with amortization, that's the best way to do it.
Well, we've talked about it, in this body before, but if for example, that you're replacing, I'm just doing this for simple math. If you're replacing a 30 squad cars every 3 years, why don't we just budget for that and have that come out of your levy rather than, Director Ellenbecker, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't we used to make some of these asset purchases using the levy in the past?
I'm going to say yes. It started back in about 2014, 15 is when they started moving more and more as we continued not to increase the mill rate. More and more items that used to be in our operating budget started getting moved to the to bonding. I could go back and I could follow up and give you exact dates on when we started putting them into a bonding request. But yes, they used to be, some of these items used to be in the operating budget.
Okay. And then just one more point, and then I would open the floor for any other questions. Jonathan, you had mentioned a couple of times talking about the impact on the levy, and of course the need to, whether it was inferred or not, but the need to raise taxes, to cover that extra payment. But of course, spending reductions would be an option as well.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why, in this, I say all else being equal. If the operating levy stays the same, and the debt levy increases, then that's tax increases. But if you can balance it out elsewhere in the budget, then that's another way to manage it.
I have one more question, Director Ellenbecker, because sometimes we just have so many things that fly at us. It's easy to get them confused. We did approve at the last council meeting the notes for this year, right?
We did approve the $3.8 million that Jonathan mentioned. However, we have not actually approved and approved the amortization schedule. Typically on 10 years, pretty much straight line. So this still can be adjusted to determine how much you want and how quickly you want to pay back the notes. That still can be adjusted.
When would the first payment be due on these notes?
Next year.
The principal, well, potentially, Jonathan, do we have interest in October of 22? No?
No, we would have the first payment be in 23.
Principal would be April of 23, and then interest, it'd be interest and principal in April of 23, and then the second half of the interest in October of 23.
That's correct.
Okay. And the reason I'm asking, of course, just understanding if any decision we make today would have any fiscal impact on this year's budget, but it doesn't sound that way. Okay. Committee, any other questions? Alder Galvin?
So going forward, are we going to be identifying these items from each department's budget requests? I think we'd have to almost identify those or set a policy in advance, wouldn't we? Otherwise, by the time we get the budget, it's, and we're going to start moving that around. It's almost too late then to tell a department, we've got to figure out $600,000 in cuts if we want to keep the levy if everything, mashes out that way. I think I've always said it's ridiculous to be, and I'm not picking on the police department, but I knew when I was working with the police department that we were taking out loans for cars, and it seemed ridiculous to me at the time. And I'm sure if we go through other departments, I'm not sure if that would hold true in so much as, like as far as vehicles are related, we started the program of leasing them. And I do know that some of vehicles that the police vehicles included are at times passed down to other departments to be used, it's just road cars. But there's other things like that. I think we need to kind of get the departments to get on board and identify those items so we have an idea what we're talking about. So when the mayor puts his budget together, he knows we're looking at, if we want to at least stay where we're at, he's gonna have to find cuts at, like right now, at least 600,000. Not sure what everything else would come out to.
Good point.
Go ahead, Jim.
And it just seems to me that by going from year note to 5-year note, overall, we're only saving, we're only $800,000 in P&I. To me, that must mean we have very low interest rate right now. Is that true? What's the interest rate we're using on these?
Yes, let me give you the answer here. We are using an interest rate of a sale that took place, similar rated community in March, plus a cushion. It's an average interest rate of about 3%, just over 3%. And
Okay.
Jonathan
if-
is, whoops.
Oh, go ahead.
Just for clarification, is that just for the 10-year note or is that a combination of the 20-year and 10-year?
both, yeah.
Okay, indications are the interest rates might rise. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry, go ahead.
And if they rise, won't the differences be more significant? Going
Well,
from a 10 to a 5-year.
in that, yeah, in that interest will be higher. Yeah, I mean, yes, that's correct. If they rise, the interest will be higher in both schedules. But because you're paying less interest or you're paying it off quicker in the 5-year option, you're going to be subject to less interest overall. So it will go up in both schedules, but
Right.
yes.
Okay. I think it totally makes sense to the year of the use to the year of the loan in a sense of the note. So yeah, I think Alder Johnson is right in following this tact.
Alder Burnett.
Yeah, Mr. Schatz, thanks for attending and presenting. Obviously, you consult, I'm assuming, with other municipalities. Is that correct?
Yes.
Can you think, is this a common practice for other municipalities where we are borrowing on a 10-year note for items that last 3 to 5 years?
My insight would be that the bigger the municipality, the more it becomes a concern. Smaller municipalities don't necessarily differentiate between the useful life, but a bigger municipality with a lot of diverse assets in the borrowing request will tend to have more of these complex structures.
So a city, do you consult with cities in Wisconsin?
Yeah,
or
yes.
regionally? Are you outside of Wisconsin?
Not me, but the firm does, yes.
Okay, because there aren't many cities in Wisconsin in that $100,000 or 100,000 population range. I would assume anywhere from 80 to 100,000 in population, which is where Green Bay fits. You say that practice is, we're not like an outlier, is what I'm getting at. There are other municipalities that have done this.
Oh yeah. I would say it's and it depends completely on the overall levy profile, debt levy profile. But I think that yes, for larger municipalities, and I do mean like the city of Green Bay, it would not be unusual to want this kind of more complex structure to achieve some balance and not pay more interest than you need to.
Yeah, I think this isn't a question, but more of a comment to kind of wrap up my questions to you. But as a city, according to Director Ellenbecker, we maybe went off the rails 2013 to 2015, and now every year since then, it's gotten much easier for the council or the administration to kind of push items into bonding that otherwise we should be putting on the tax levy. So I think we understand that now, and well, we've always understood it, but at some point the city needs to correct the action so that we're not continually borrowing money for long-term borrowing for items that only last 3 to 5 years. So thank you for your presentation.
Of course.
So I think maybe I'm going to leave the floor open right now in case there is a question that comes up. Of course, the question, I think, Director Ellenbecker, you're looking for a recommendation tonight as well, right? On what to do here?
Yes, I was gonna, yes, I would be looking for a recommendation. Couple of things is, you're right, this is not the first year, probably second or third year in a row, we've talked about putting squad cars back into the budget gets tight, we put them back into bonding. This year, just the squad cars and the helmets that had roughly 3 to 5 year life, we are borrowing $589,000 or roughly $600,000. If next year we decide to put the squads back into the operating budget, that would already take up, an additional $600,000. So, and I would definitely be looking for some direction on, we could do both. I mean, but we're already looking at roughly, instead of $200,000 on the levy for debt, if we decide to shorten it up, we'd be looking at 600, we'd be looking at about plus $400,000 increase to the debt levy if we make a change this time. And then if we make another change and start getting squads now, really focus in and start putting the squads back into the operating budget, that's another $500,000 in expenses. So I'm just, I am looking for direction. Right now, if we did not have this discussion, we would have gone with really column 1 of the 10-year notes, as Jonathan has presented. So it would have been the longest one, which of course is allocated over 10 years.
Alder
If
Galvin?
I could, I'm pretty sure we covered this already. I just want to get it clarified in my head. What if we said today, we're not taking out a loan? We'd have to fund out of this year's budget that we're currently in, or?
Well, I think that's already been approved. What we need to figure out is what amortization schedule do we want on the promissory notes that we've already authorized.
My personal opinion is, if it's a 3-year car, you go with a 3-year note. Like you said before, Brian, this isn't sustainable. We keep doing this. We keep burying ourselves deeper and deeper into debt. At what point, how many cars are we going to be paying on that we no longer have? I mean, it's just something where that debt just, and I can understand why it was done back in 2013 or whenever it was done. It's kind of in a way, a sneaky, easy way of getting out of a tight budget, or getting something in that you really wanted to pay for by saying, well, let's just take out this loan for these cars. But then, like anything, once you get used to eating a lot of cookies, it's kind of hard to give them up. And getting off that sugar high is the thing that we're going to have to figure out a way of doing it. But my opinion would be to go with a 3-year cargo with a 3-year note.
I think the one thing we keep picking on the police vehicles as one example. And I think the helmets were another example that were pulled out, but I'm going to maybe defer to Director Ellenbecker. What other items were on that bonding request that typically have a shorter useful life that could be lumped in with this discussion?
I will.
And I want to be clear too, this has nothing to do with the police department. This is a council decision. So I just want to be sure that, if they don't feel like they're taking punches here, because they're definitely not. This is our responsibility. So.
Yeah, absolutely not. But it's just, I'm trying to think hard on items that we've bought. The fire trucks last a lot longer. Pretty much all the other city heavy duty vehicles we get have a lot longer lifespan. And I'm trying to think of any other infrastructure usually is going to last 20, 30 or years or more, that we bond for normally. So I can't think of anything unless a director can come up with some items.
Would be okay, if Jonathan, if I would share the second page of your presentation that was in the packet from 2 weeks ago.
Sure.
Are you able to see the screen?
Yep.
Okay, so I don't know if I can, let me try to make it a little bigger. But to read it again, this is Jonathan. It's recapping mine. I had an Excel spreadsheet. He just put in his format. His is maybe a little bit easier to see. Anything you're going to see in the GO bonds is the total is of $14 million, but of that, $5.9 million is streets, and then we have 3.7 million of sanitary and storm. $700,000 of parking repairs. We have fire engines and remounting of engines for fire department of 1.6 million. And then we have improvements to parks, and that's really the list of them are over here. If you cannot see them, let me know. So that's about $1.3 million. I'm sorry, that is 980,000. And then we have the DPW garage repairs, and that is 1.3 million. All those together are right now are in the GO bonds of 20 years. And so our bond council goes through and looks at items that typically would have that are longer, that are even can be put in a 20-year and typically have a useful life of at least 20 years. The last column is our GO notes. So as we went down, 517,000 was the police squads, which we know have a 3 to 4 year life. Then we went into the mobile radios. I believe they have about a 10-year life. And that would be another item. That's 24,000. We have some handheld radios of 76,000. So those are questionable. I could ask more information on how long those typically last. The officers' helmets, I believe it's 3 to 5 years of useful life. Next item is roof repair of 240,000. So at that point, that should have at least a 10-year useful life. If we as we jump down a little lower, we have a dump truck body. We have a 72-inch deck mower. We have a skidster, and then we also have snow blowers, toolcat snow blower item. And I believe all of them at least have a 10-year. If we put them in our fixed assets, they would all have at least a 10-year useful life on it. We continue on. Riot Fire also has $468,000 of portable radios. They have ambulances that have a 12-year life, including that is, they're already in reserve by 12 years, but it does have a 12-year life. Huge garbage trucks. Those are
Chairman,
probably right.
If I could, I'm sorry, Alderman Johnson, could I just make a quick comment?
Yes.
Yeah, on the Director Ellenbecker, on the original bonding for capital items request form, it said that ambulance are 4 years frontline and then 5 to 6 years as a reserve ambulance. So typically you're correct, like a 10-year. So I just want to let the committee know that on some of these explanations, there is under the description and justification on the bond request, some departments do put the life expectancy.
And I apologize, the 12-year is what we use for fixed assets, and that's what they typically are supposed to last is 12 years. Our fire department may change them out a little faster than maybe than what their useful life is per our like capital asset policy. Correct. All those items, there should have been some useful life on the detail sheets back when we did the CIP. Would you like me to continue? So we have our refuge trucks we have 2 of them for a total of 670. And those, I believe they swap them out right around 8 to 9 years. We have 16 of them. So they try to replace them roughly every 8 years. Sometimes it's 9 years, depends upon timing. So that is anywhere around an 8 or 9 year useful life. We have a loader of 210,000, a dump truck for 235,000, a asphalt repair 90,000, and a sidewalk tractor of 70,000. Going down one more dump truck body. And I believe all of them have over a 10-year life. So when we did pull out what the only things that really jumped off the page that were well under 5 years was probably the squad cars and the helmets. The radios, I don't actually have an answer for. I would have to go back and look at some emails, but at that point, we must have decided that they would be closer to the 10-year. So that's the items that make up our $3.8 million.
So when we, Jonathan, just a question for you then. I mean, is there a minimum amount that we can borrow using these notes?
No.
Okay, so we could pull out any amount here and say, we're going to put this on a 3-year note, and we're going to put this on a 10-year note. That's possible?
Yes, because we're ultimately issuing just one, it's one debt issue. We're just creating different amortization schedules within that.
Okay.
So yeah, yes.
So when I pulled out squad cars and helmets, because again, those two seem to be the two items that emerge, it's 589,500. Now we talked about obviously impact to the levy, reduce expenses or raise taxes. But we have this unique, a third option, and perhaps Director Ellenbecker, you could weigh in on this a little bit, but that's leveraging one-time ARPA funds to help get us back on track. The one thing I'm not fully aware of, and I don't want to speak for other, we've approved a small amount of ARPA funds, small amount relative to the overall amount that's been allocated to us. What's the plan there?
The
Is that an
ARPA
option, right? When we think about the lost revenue category in particular, would that perhaps be an option to help start this transition back to shorter notes?
Yes, and that it would be a qualified expense.
And so, of course, in the piece where I was saying I don't have a lot of knowledge, it's what staff's plan in terms of the rollout of making requests for the deployment of some of that funding.
We had left it really up to the department heads as they had requests and then as they had needs that they would submit it to. Really, they start with the mayor and they start with our grant administrator, make sure that it qualifies, and then she starts the paperwork.
Okay, so there isn't necessarily a plan to say we want to make these requests, but we just haven't made them yet.
No, that was not part of the plan, to ask for equipment or any bonded items out of using ARPA money. That was a decision back when when the bonding, this same question really came up when we approved the bonding of 18 million a couple meetings ago. The discussion of ARPA was discussed. There was decision not to use it, and we move forward with it. So I haven't attempted to use ARPA money at this point because that was the council made a decision not to go down that path.
Okay.
If I could, I'm not wild about using ARPA money for, I understand it's kind of a way to get back on track in a way. But it's what, 1 year, 2 years? Can we extend it out 3 years? But at some point, you got to pay the piper. I feel I made a mistake when I was first on and we used stadium tax money, $1 million to offset increasing the budget when we should have just increased the levy, and we didn't. And then the next year we used $800,000 out of our savings. So at the end of 2 years, we're in the whole 1.8 million, and we suddenly had to find a way of doing that. And I think this is how we end up taking out loans for squad cars for 10 or 20 years. I wouldn't be comfortable doing it again like that. I think those ARPA funds, we should be trying to use them for one-time things that we're not going to be dependent on every year that comes, cyclically through our budget.
Yeah, and I'll admit, Bill, I'm a little reluctant to do it without having a little bit more knowledge and information in front of us. I just want to make sure, though, that as a committee, we're evaluating every option that is available to us. And so to that point, Director Ellenbecker, any other options that you think we ought to be thinking about discussing?
We've talked about whether or not you could go lease police cars, and we've gone and I think they talked to one, if not two vendors, and it just financially doesn't make sense when you're going through them that fast. So that was an option. We looked at it. One other thing I wanted to add, and I'm sure you remember, but we did use $655,000 of ARPA in the 2022 operating budget. And that did cover some one-time equipment and some needs and some other things that came up. And we used that in our operating budget. So we did use it on some pieces of equipment. Back to your original question of, I don't have any other funding sources at this point. like you said, certainly operating budget makes the most sense to get it back into the operating budget for these items that have a shorter useful life.
Okay. Well, committee, do we have any other questions for Ehlers here?
Just real quick, as Director Ellenbecker was naming off some of these items, they had 8 years, 9 year, 10-year, 5-year, 3-year. We can arrange loans for all those items with those kind of time parameters on it. It's not locked in. It's got to be 3, 5, 10, 15, 20, 30, like that. We can ask for, like, if it's an 8-year vehicle, get an 8-year loan on it.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Can I just clarify? It's one, like Jonathan said, it's one loan, but then every
Right.
item would have its own amortization. So the police car is
Exactly.
going to have amortized over the first 3 years. So you're very heavy on the front end, and then something that's 8 years, 9 years. Yes, it's we're just moving up the payment of those. It's all in the same loan. We're just moving up the squads
Sure.
to be paid off first. Then we pay off the helmets next, and then we pay off the radios, and then we'll pay off the garbage trucks. And really, so it's still one issue.
And that would be my recommendation. I mean, I know the helmets are 5 years. Kevlar is rated warranted for 5 years. I mean, you can use them longer, but if something happens and there's no warranty, I mean, the city faces a libelous situation there. But I mean, again, if we decide that's worth the risk, that's up to us. But I would prefer that, my recommendation would be that we get loans for the life of the item, radios, everything.
I think there was a discussion. I mean, there was a time we went to, and I don't want to put Chief Davis on the spot, but there was a time that we had talked about going to hybrids. They were slightly more expensive, and there was a time that, at the time, I think the chief he was given information that the hybrids, the SUVs were going to last maybe closer to 4 years. But I think since then there's been some more analysis done, and I'm not sure if that is still current. Again, I'm not sure these newer pieces of equipment, maybe they have a longer useful life than 3 years, but.
No, it has to do with, and the battery for the hybrid car goes out of warranty at 100,000 miles. And we're getting to 100,000 miles in about 3 years with our patrol cars. And then it's a risk after that, because if that battery goes bad, it's a colossal expense to replace it. Where we're looking at savings in hybrid cars is probably in fuel costs, and especially as gas prices go up. We'll be glad we had those, but yeah, the problem is that just with the number of vehicles that we have in our marked fleet, a lot of other places, they have more vehicles, and so they aren't driven 24 hours a day all the time. And you can get patrol cars to last 5 or 6 years that way. You just have to have more of them. And so we're getting to that mileage limit too fast.
So to usher this along, perhaps maybe what I would suggest is if we, of course, recognizing the floor is still open, but I just want to make sure if there are any other questions that we don't have to be redundant there in that process. But if Alder Galvin, if I'm tracking, it would be to identify the life of each asset. And that's what we would do the note for. And perhaps then what I would ask of Director Ellenbecker is that prior to council, we could be given those numbers so that we can actually review those before council meeting. Because I feel a little bit, at a disadvantage here by not seeing those scenarios and understanding what that fiscal impact is. So if we could have that for council, I think that would be useful. And then, of course, my one wish or hope is that every asset doesn't all of a sudden have a 10-year lifespan. So if we could be very sincere, I guess, with what we expect those to be. Did I capture that properly, Alder Galvin?
Yep, exactly. You're not on.
Okay, so maybe unless there's further questions for Ehlers, I would entertain a motion to close the floor.
Can I just make sure, unfortunately, Jonathan would be the one who would be running these numbers for me. I would like him to verbally say whether or not he thinks he can get us something prior to potentially by Monday at the latest.
I think the bigger challenge here is that we need to have a preliminary official statement for this sale, which will have a structure in it by by the end of this week. And that can be changed up until the sale date. So that's not a concern, but I want to make sure that I at least said that you know, we have to put something into a formal document this week that's going to go to Moody's, that's going to have a structure in it prior to this council meeting. And the council can still make changes to the structure, and we can still be flexible with it up until sale date. But just so you know that there is going to be a structure out there that maybe doesn't have this feedback on it. And yes, to that question, yes, I can get this built by the end of the week.
Just to add to his note, we do have the Moody's rating call on next Wednesday. And again, so that's where Jonathan is saying we have to get them a preliminary document for them to review prior to a meeting on Wednesday morning, first thing Wednesday morning. So that I just wanted to let you know when the date of that call is.
Okay. So Jonathan, Diana, I mean, from your perspective, if this ends up being the motion in the direction perspective that would draw red flags that would make you say this isn't a good decision because of X.
No, I think that as long as there's a bit of an understanding that time is not on our side for this particular year's borrowing, but I think if we can maybe broaden it out and saying that, you know, we're working on guidance for maybe next year and going forward, and that would be helpful, because ultimately if there's a decision made that, you know, or if they need to go back to committee and council, you know, sale date, unfortunately at that point we won't be able to make changes. But otherwise, no, I think it's good. I was hoping, you know, this was kind of going to go in this direction, and you want to start looking at this in terms of making a policy decision.
Okay. So with that, then I guess I would entertain a motion to close the floor.
Motion to close the floor.
Second.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Alder Galvin, do you want to capture this in a motion?
Sure. I make a motion that Director Ellenbecker put together a list, so to speak, of items that have been identified to be that we're bonding for, but that the bond for that be set at the lifespan of the item that we're bonding for.
The only clarification I would say is that these are going to be the GO notes, which are the ones that are currently being amortized over 10 years.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so that's the motion. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, is there any? All right, seeing none of those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Jonathan. Much appreciated. Okay, moving on to item number 4, review the City of Green Bay's 1033 program inventory. Chief Davis, we have a new member of the committee, so if you could also just give a brief background on what this is.
Sure. So the 1033 program is a federal program by which military surplus equipment is available to local and county law enforcement agencies for free. Usually we just have to go pick it up somewhere. I know that there can be in some places concern getting to militarization of police. My policy on this for the time that I've been here is I'm not interested in military equipment, but if they have a piece of equipment, for example, this last item on here, item 99, this truck, all of these things have military descriptions that sound maybe different than what they are. That is a 2002 Chevy Tahoe that we got for free. We just had to go down to Columbus, Ohio and drive it back. So we use this a lot for vehicles these days. There are a number of rifles on here. These 5.56 millimeter rifles. These are all M4 type, the civilian version of this would be an AR-15 platform that mostly for patrol rifles and the tactical team. These are things that we would buy as police equipment from a vendor, but if we can get them for free, it saves us a lot of money. You'll also see some things on here like sights and those kind of things, these range finders. These are things that tend to be used by the special weapons and tactics team. We have a couple of diver suits on here for the dive team. Night vision equipment that's strictly a SWAT team item. There is one thing I'll just point because it always catches my eye every time I look at this list, item 94, this unmanned vehicle, ground, that says it's worth $475,000. That apparently is this big truck thing that has wheels that I think are 5 or 6 feet high that we got to use in helping in flood rescues because it sits really high up off the ground. So, but it's in a nutshell, it's that program. It's just and all of this is subject to council oversight, and that's why we have these regular report outs to the committee, just so you all are aware of what we're getting with this program, so that you can see that we're not getting, tanks or, aircraft or things like that we really don't need.
If I recall correctly, Chief Davis, we have you come here quarterly with this report.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Any questions on the inventory?
No.
Entertain a motion to receive and place on file.
Moved.
So moved.
All right,
Second.
we have a motion by Alder Burnett, second by Alder Galvin. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Item number 5, to report out the acceptance of Wisconsin Department of Justice grant for law enforcement drug trafficking response for a $32,000 award. Staff?
Yeah, I can jump in. We have a grant policy and we have a grant program that we typically should come to the committee first and ask for accepting of a grant. This grant we happen to have accepted before we brought it to you. So that's why I showed as a report out. But all the details of the grant is in the document or in the packet.
So do you need us to actually accept the grant or to just receive and place and file the report?
You could probably just receive and place on file the report, but we just want to make sure that the finance committee and then the council knows that that we did move forward with a grant and that we did accept this $32,000 award.
Okay, committee?
I have no questions.
Mhm.
Someone like to make a motion?
Motion to receive and place on file.
Second.
All right, we have a motion by Alder Galvin, a second by Alder Burnett. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, motion carries. Item number 6, consideration with possible action on a request by the city treasurer to approve the resolution of financial institutions the city does business with. Director Ellenbecker?
I'm going to turn this right over to our treasurer Manley.
Thanks. So as part of my investment policy, I say that annually I will bring you a list of the banks that we do business with. So I've just updated this from what we had last year with the addition of the TD Ameritrade account. So that is the account that we actually are using Ellers for our investments now too. And so all those investments are run through the TD Ameritrade account. It would be my goal to actually start to eliminate some of these smaller accounts as our investments are all being housed with the TD Ameritrade one now.
Okay, any questions?
No.
All right, I guess we would entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All right, I have a motion by Galvin, second by Burnett. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Those motion carries. Item number 7, report of the Claims Committee. Alder Hutchison, are you familiar with this?
I went through the claims, first time I've ever seen anything like that. That was very interesting.
Okay, so obviously that is a confidential report right now until after it's approved, but I just wanted to make sure because it's not part of the typical meeting packet. You actually have to go in through Civic Clerk to see it. And I know I
Okay.
missed it first couple times.
Okay, no, I read each one with interest, and who actually determines yay or nay? I guess that's the
Sure.
question.
Let me defer to Attorney Bunger to provide a brief explanation on that process.
Yes, sure. Good evening, committee members. Essentially, the claims process is laid out through our ordinance. So our ordinance organizes the claims committee, which is made up of myself, the deputy city attorney, our paralegal, assistant director Pam Manley, and our risk manager Nate Froming. And our claims administrator and legal assistant Becky DeWitt handles all the intake and all the correspondence between us and the claimants. And chapters 60 or state statutes basically govern the process for filing of municipal claims. They lay out the statute of limitations and kind of the procedural aspects with respect to handling of claims brought against municipalities for property damage and personal injury. So essentially what the claims committee does is they receive the claim from the claimant. Our claims administrator reaches out to the various departments to gather evidence, get statements from employees involved in the incident, pictures, police reports, and then the claims committee reviews all of that information that's provided by the claimant and that what we've gathered from departments and other city officials, and then makes an analysis as to whether the city is negligent and whether we have any contribution or exposure, and then ultimately makes a recommendation and a decision and a vote as to whether a claim should be denied and for what reasoning, and if it should be settled for what reasoning. And we have a threshold of up to $25,000 to settle claims, and anything over that threshold, we have to come to finance and to be able to get approval.
Good. Thank you.
So I actually did have a question about one of the items on there. So with that said, I guess as the chair, I can do it. I would make a motion that we go into closed session so that I can ask a question about it.
Second.
I'll just read the language here. The committee may convene in closed session pursuant to section 19.85 subsection 1 subsection G Wisconsin statute for the purpose of conferring with legal counsel for the governmental body who is rendering oral or written advice concerning strategy be adopted by the body with respect to litigation which it is likely in which it is or is likely to become involved. The committee will thereafter reconvene in open session pursuant to section 19.85 subsection 2 Wisconsin statute to take action on items discussed in closed session if appropriate and to consider the remainder of the agenda. So is there any discussion about going into closed session? All right, seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. All right, committee would entertain a motion to return to closed session. Or open session, sorry.
Motion to return to open session.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion by Brunette, a second by Hutchison. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Committee, what's your pleasure?
Even place
Motion.
on file.
Second.
All right, we have a motion by Galvin, second by Brunette. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Item F, informational. $200,000 remains in the contingency account. Any additional information?
Nope,
Okay,
there's
item
not.
2, the next finance committee meeting will be held on Tuesday, May 10th at 4:30 PM. Entertain a motion to adjourn.
So
So
moved.
moved.
We have a
Second.
motion by Brunetta, second by Galvin. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, motion carries. Jim, we log back in with the personnel committee Zoom information.
Oh, boy.
He should,
I'll make-